Hi, hello, who am I? What is this? Doesn't matter. Do you have existential anxiety? And by this, I don't mean anxiety about the socio-political state of the world or climate change or finding your purpose in life or career path. These things, although they're obviously important, they're situational. Now, when we hear existential anxiety, we might think of a more fundamental concern, sort of an underlying concern about the nature of reality itself. Do you spend a lot of time thinking about the nature of reality? Do you often think, what if I'm living in a simulation? Do other people exist in the way that I exist? Are other people robots or zombies without minds? Do you think a lot about death or infinity or oblivion? Do you think about how you know that you're real? How do you know if anything's real? It's perfectly natural to ask these questions, even from a very young age. Questioning reality seems to be a uniquely human ability. It speaks to our self-awareness and curiosity and intelligence. Most importantly, though, it speaks to our desire to have answers, even to problems that don't have answers. While this line of questioning about reality is understandable, it can still interfere with your life if you get stuck on certain thoughts, especially if the thoughts are disturbing or scary when they come up. You can have panic attacks, you can lose sleep, you can feel less hopeful about your life and less connected to yourself or other people if you keep having these thoughts. Thankfully, there are things you can do about it. But first, let's take an appallingly brief look at the history of the word existentialism in Western philosophy. Quickly, I promise. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, he was a prolific writer in the mid-19th century. He's often credited as being the founder of existentialism. He was intensely focused on the purpose of being or becoming as an active process throughout our lives. He was also concerned with humans as individuals versus being sort of like a part of the crowd, and how that relates to choice and personal responsibility. He posed the question, how do we act and act ethically when the future is always unknown? From his works come a key term translated as dread, having to make choices in the face of the unknown and in the face of doubt. This dread is necessary because it describes the conditions of living for all of us. It can lead to inaction. You can stall out if you don't know how to make decisions in the face of the unknown. This dread, however, can be overcome if it's transformed into movement, into action, and perhaps even by taking a leap of faith. Kierkegaard's work on choice, on dread, and action led up to the academic and literary phenomenon known as existentialism in the 20th century. Notable existentialists include Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, Merleau-Ponty, and Camus. These authors were concerned with the individual as a subject of experience. And topics included agency and autonomy, what it means to live authentically, and the value of human existence. Existential dread appears as the backdrop to genuine action. It makes true choice possible. As life is full of unknowns, we have to rely on our character, our belief, our convictions in order to make choices, such as the choice in occupation or the choice in our partner or how we treat other people. Thoughts about nothingness, the void, concepts of death. In existentialism, these things actually preserve our freedom as agents, as we can choose to live in the face of absurdity, of the idea of nothingness, of the idea of not being. We are beings emerging from not being. What is beyond the limits of our knowledge, the unknown, death, these are presented as absurdities, as a backdrop to our lives. Giving into the absurdity of non-being, of non-concepts such as nothingness, of something beyond our understanding, that falls into the realm of nihilism. It can lead to inaction and ultimately not living authentically. And here we start to see the fragments of what we consider to be modern existential anxiety. In philosophy, existential questions like this are raised as a way to advance an argument. So they're like fun hypotheticals, like what if we're living in the Matrix, or what if everyone but you is a zombie and you're just never going to know. These are thought experiments that you can use to gain a different perspective about life. But what happens when you engage with these thoughts every day, or even worse, every moment of your day? If this takes up an inordinate amount of your time and is distressing to a certain point, it can actually be considered a more serious disorder. For example, dissociation can make you feel like you're in a state of unreality, like you're an alien landing on this planet for the first time. You don't recognize yourself, you feel disconnected from the world around you. The familiar becomes unfamiliar in a very scary way. This is a thing that the mind does as a protective mechanism. It can come from trauma and what can be called the loss of the assumptive world, or the loss of feeling secure in the world. If existential questions are persistent enough, it could also point to something like existential OCD, which is a flavor of OCD. It revolves around constant thoughts about the nature of reality. So that would be the obsessive component. And it undermines your ability to live fully, these obsessions, and then also feeling like you have to engage with the obsessions. So you have to fight against them, you have to neutralize them, or else something terrible will happen. If any of this sounds a little too familiar to you, I suggest you seek professional help because these things can be successfully treated, even if it doesn't feel like there's a way out right now. But what about more casual existential anxiety that's still disturbing? So maybe you find yourself going down these rabbit holes at night on occasion and you can't find a way out. What can you do? So number one, it's actually very counterintuitive. Stop looking for a way out. Give up the fight. The more you focus on a disturbing thought, the longer you will be having that thought. Accept the limits of your knowledge and let those unanswerable questions come and go as they please. Because if you think about it, it's the ultimate psych out, trying to solve an insolvable question. You can also do something like grounding. Grounding activities are things that make you feel like you're a part of the world again. So that could be being mindful of the present, such as paying attention to what you can see, what you can hear, what you can smell in the here and the now. Sometimes touching something cold or holding a piece of ice can be helpful for people. Finding an exercise that connects you to the movements of your body, that can be helpful. Even watching a comforting TV show or having a conversation with someone can feel really grounding when you need it. Number 3 is engagement or re-engagement in your life. So this is gradually shifting your attention to a project that you're excited about, applying yourself to your interests and hobbies, and thinking about what you want your future to look like. Number 4 is seeing distortions for what they really are. So for example, let's say you think a lot about being in a simulation and thinking about what is more real or less real. But it's like more real or less real in comparison to what? What is the measuring stick of reality here? How would you answer the question of what's more or less real? Also, if you were able to answer this question, would it make any conceivable change in the way that you live your life right now? What if you think a lot about death, about nothingness, about oblivion? Well, these are all non-concepts. They don't have content by definition. So why are you fighting with a non-concept? These ideas are kind of like, they're like empty ideas. There is nothing substantial to them that you can experience, let alone argue against. And doing so would be kind of nonsensical. Other cognitive distortions you might recognize would be all or nothing thinking, assuming the worst, and other biases that we have. Number 5 is finding the root of your existential anxiety. I guarantee you, your anxiety is not about something that resides outside of the limits of your knowledge, because you don't know what's outside of the limits of your knowledge. Instead, If you accept that, your anxiety has to be something within your lived experience. So find out what this anxiety is really about. Are you lonely? Are you afraid of losing your loved ones? Maybe you had a bad psychedelic trip and need to sort out your feelings. Maybe your worldview has been shattered by a traumatic event. Who knows? But there's probably a story to be told there. All in all, have fun with these weird existential thoughts without draining your cognitive resources. You should be thinking more about climate change, about your interests, about your hobbies, your studies, or about how you're going to merge into traffic right now, or whatever it is that you need to do. I don't know. I hope this was helpful. Be good.